Hey guys, it's Drew again. With a 252 batting average, 60 career home runs, 19 stolen bases, a career WAR of 1.2 in a 13-year career, the player we're going to talk about today was absolutely what you would call an average player. But he had an exceptional story, and I wanted to share it with you today. So let's check it out. So the player we're going to talk about and highlight today, his name is Bob Aspromonte. He played from roughly 1960 to about 1972. Started with the Dodgers. He went to Houston in the Colt 45s in their initial draft and played most of his career there. Played a few years in Atlanta for the Braves and finally ended up with the Mets. He was a slick fielding shortstop, but he didn't have a great bat. Like I said, lifetime average was only 252 and a WAR of only 1.2, which made him an average player. He's the kind of guy that if you were looking through your cards and you find a copy of it, it's what you would call a common. But he has an exceptional story, so we want to talk about that story. If you've never heard this story before, just bear with me to the end because it's crazy the twists and turns it takes. And I'm betting by the end, if you've never looked for a Bob Aspromonte card, you'll be looking for one to add to your collection just to have a representation of this exceptional story with an average player. So the story starts back in 1962. There was a young boy, actually from Arkansas, named Bill Bradley, who was struck by lightning. And while it did not kill him, it did leave him blind. And he was taken to Houston to go through a series of operations to try to regain his eyesight. From a doctor named Dr. Lewis Gerard. We're going to come back to Dr. Lewis Gerard in a little bit. But so he was taken down, and while he was in recovery and in the hospital, he was listening to baseball games because obviously he couldn't see; he was all patched up. And the new Houston Colt 45s, who eventually became the Houston Astros, were on the radio. So he was listening, and he fell in love with this player named Bob Aspromonte. Well, he requested if there was any way that he could come and visit him in the hospital, which Aspromonte did. Went to the Children's Hospital, and he brought him some gifts. He brought him a glove. He brought him a transistor radio so he could listen to the games. And they struck up a little bit of a friendship. And before they left, Bill Bradley asked Aspromonte, he's like, "Look, could you hit a home run tonight for me?" Now, Aspromonte was not a home run hitter. The date was May 7th, 1962. They were playing the Los Angeles Dodgers, Aspromonte's former team. And he's like, "Well, I'm not much of a home run hitter, but I'll do my best." And, you got to think the pressure of trying to do that. If you could just hit a home run at will, especially as a non-home run hitter, it had to be quite hard. But as he came up, the Dodgers were actually winning, and Aspromonte came up with after having a few at bats late in the game, and he came up with the bases loaded, and he swung as hard as he could, and he connected with the ball perfectly, and he hit a grand slam to put the the Colt 45s above the Dodgers, to which they ultimately won the game 9-6. Well, I mean, Aspromonte was excited, but of course Bill Bradley was super excited that he heard this on the radio, and just the relief. I can't imagine the relief that it gave to Aspromonte to be able to do this. So they developed a little bit of a friendship, and like I said, these surgeries were going on for Bill Bradley, and to come back and forth to Houston from his hometown. So he's back in town again for another surgery, and this is on June 11th, and Aspromonte decides to take him and his family out to lunch. And while they were sitting there, and this was actually a year later. This was in 1963. So as they're sitting there at lunch, he's slowly gaining some of his vision back. But he says, "Could you hit another home run for me?" And at this point in time, again, Aspromonte's not a home run hitter, and he's actually suffering from a bad back, and he's having a hard time even playing, let alone trying to hit a home run. His batting average that year at this point in time was only 198. It was under 200. But he wants to be able to do this, so he comes up and he goes to the game, and he's going through, and this is on his mind. His mind is on trying not to disappoint this kid who looks up to him as a hero, but to try to hit a home run. Well, as the innings go on, it just doesn't look like he's going to be able to. But the game goes up into extra innings, and this is against the Chicago Cubs, and he comes up in the bottom of the 10th inning, and again he comes up with bases loaded, and he connects and he hits a ball for a grand slam as a walk-off home run, a walk-off grand slam to win. Well, you can imagine in this game that means nothing. It's early on in the season. I mean, he is flying around the bases like Bill Mazeroski did winning the World Series in 1960 with a walk-off. I mean, he is elated the fact that he hit this home run. For this kid, it was a grand slam to win it. And so he goes, and they have this connection. Well, about a month and a half later, on July 26th, Bill Bradley and his family are back. And now he actually comes to the game, and he has a little bit of a vision as he's going through another surgery trying to fix his eyesight. And he had a total of 6 surgeries, 3 on each eye, to try to restore his eyesight. But he can see, and he says, "Could you do it again?" And he's like, "Are you kidding me?" You know, like in his mind, he's like, "I'll try," but you know, there's no promise that he could do this, that he could hit another home run. In fact, he had not hit a home run since the Grand Slam on June 11th, and his batting average had dropped down to 176. He was in the middle of a slump, and you've got a slumping, light-hitting shortstop with a bad back, and he's trying to fulfill the dream of this little kid who has actually come to the game to watch him and to try to hit a home run. Well, again, he comes up, and now this time it's in the, I believe it was in the first inning, but he comes up with bases loaded, and he connects again. For the 3rd time, he hits a home run for Bill Bradley, and he is just excited. Well, this sparked off a friendship between this young man and this ball player, and they stay connected through writing and visits and stuff like that. It's an incredible story. It's like a Hollywood story. The fact that there's a sick kid asking his hero to be able to do something just spectacular, and he not only does it, he does it 3 different times. And again, he only hit 60 home runs for his career. 3 of them were for Bill Bradley. And the fact is that 2 of them were grand slams, and they were back-to-back home runs for him that were both grand slams. It's just an incredible story. But that's not where the story ends. So as time goes on, Aspromonte goes through his career. He ends up retiring, and he grows on, and he continues to go through life. Well, in 2003, there was an accident that Bob Aspromonte had, and what happened was I guess he was working on his car, and his car battery exploded, and it shot up back up in his face. And it's one of those fears that I have, and anybody who's ever worked on a car has thought about probably, and if not, you should. But anyway, and it actually left him temporarily blind in one eye. So he goes, and he still lives as a resident of Houston. He goes to a hospital, and he has to have surgery. Guess who's the surgeon that operated on Bob Aspromonte in 2003? Almost 40 years later, after, it was none other than Dr. Louis Gerard. And when Bill Bradley, who's now 51 years old, hears about this, he gives him best wishes and hopes for his recovery, and his eyesight is actually restored. So it's just the full circle, and it's one of those common interest, like human interest rather, stories that's just phenomenal. And I love hearing this. I love hearing about this story. So I don't have a whole lot from Bob Aspromonte, but I do have a few cards. So I want to show one, which is from my 1963 Fleer set. And this is a card of him. And what I love about this card is so many different things. First of all, I love this set. And I haven't highlighted this set, and I probably should someday. And if you're not familiar with the 1963 Fleer set, it has a great story. And maybe I'll do a highlight video at some point. But this is a great picture of him against a brick wall. He's got a great smile. In fact, if you look at pictures and cards of him, he's so photogenic. He has this great smile. But you can still see, the Texas flag on his shoulder. You can see the 45s on his hat, Houston across his jersey. If you're not familiar with it, their original name was the Colt 45s, and it only lasted a few years because the gun company, Colt, was like, hey, you don't have permission to use our name, so they switched their name, and they ended up becoming the Houston Astros after the Astrodome. But anyway, but it's just a great picture. This is a great card. It's got great colors on it. But what I did do, and this is actually my favorite cards from the same year as my 1963 Topps card. And what I did was I actually sent this off, I don't know, probably 12, 15 years ago to Bob Aspromonte to get it signed. And the way I do everything is I write a letter, and if they send back the letter and have anything else on it, I have everything attached. So this is from the book of all my TTMs. But this is my 1963 Topps Bob Aspromonte with that great signature, totally legible, beautiful pen, and that's a great card too. I mean, 63's just got some great photographs and the inlay of the color. Again, that great smile, the 45s, you can see the Colts on his jersey. And not only that, he actually signed the letter to Drew, Bob Aspromonte, number 14. So thank you for listening to this. I hope you go out and you find a card and just find a story. Dig into some of these players that we call commons, and we throw them around like no big deal. But these were actual people who actually played well enough to get into the major leagues, and their stories deserve to be told. So if you've got a great story of a player, just leave it in the comments below and let's talk about it. Let's get some conversation going about some of the great stories behind these players. But I appreciate you coming along in this little journey. Until next time, you guys be good.